The true cost of an all-out wedding celebration. Naririnig natin na mahal magpakasal, but magkano nga ba and ano yung mga suppliers na kinukuha? This is not to encourage or discourage anyone from having a wedding celebration. This is just an objective look at the numbers. Please note that this is just a rough estimate or ballpark figure para lang may idea yung mga may plano magpakasal. Ang laki ng range na pwede mo magastos for a wedding. So for this example, the scenario is for a mid-range wedding in a Catholic church and then my reception afterwards for 100 guests. There are two types of expenses in a wedding, those that are guest dependent and those that are not. So let's do the non-guest dependent first. First category is for the church, for the ceremony, for a non-air-conditioned church, for the officiant, for the offertory, and for the choir or singer, that's 20,000 pesos. For the marriage requirements for the church and state, that's around 5,000 pesos. Next category is for the bride and groom's outfits. For the bride's outfits, let's say 15,000 pesos. For the bride's makeup, 5,000 pesos. For the groom's suit and shoes, 10,000 pesos. And for the wedding rings, 10,000 pesos. Next category is for documentation, photo and video team. For a basic package, let's say 50,000 pesos. For your prenup shoot, 10,000 pesos. Next are for your suppliers. Let's say you get an on-the-day coordinator for 20,000 pesos. And then food for your suppliers, both for brunch and for dinner, that's 8,000 pesos. Next are for miscellaneous expenses. Let's say you get a bridal car for 3,000 pesos. You get a hotel room for 5,000 pesos. And for your physical invitations, 3,000 pesos. Next are for your entourage. Let's start with your parents. Let's say you're renting a gown or a suit and that's 15,000 pesos. You're giving out cloths for your bridesmaids tapos sila yung magpapatahi. Let's say 5,000 pesos. And for your groomsmen naman, you're giving them ties and little gifts. Let's say 3,000 pesos. Ito naman, it depends how many sponsors you have. But thank you gifts, let's say around 500 pesos each and you have 10 sponsors, so that's 5,000 pesos. Next category is for the reception. Hindi pa to guest dependent na expenses. First is the florist or the styling. This will include bouquets sa church and sa reception na decor. Let's say package na siya at 50,000 pesos. Basic sounds and lights setup and LCD projector, 15,000 pesos. For your host, let's say 7,000 pesos. And for your DJ for the after party, 3,000 pesos. As for the cake, let's say you have a 3-layer fondant cake at 8,000 pesos. And then now let's move on to the reception expenses that are guest dependent. Cocktail, food and drinks, 100 per person times 100 guests, 10,000 pesos. Let's say you got a venue na kasali na yung food at 800 pesos per person times 100, 80,000 pesos. A dessert bar for 50 pesos per person or 5,000 pesos. For the alcoholic drinks, 150 per person or 15,000 pesos. And lastly, lechon for 100 per person or 10,000 pesos. Overall food and drinks expense is 1,200 pesos or 120,000 pesos. So in total, that's 390,000 pesos or 3,900 per person for a mid-range wedding. If you go more low range, that's around 2,925. And if you go higher end of the spectrum, let's say 8,730 pesos per person. Excluded na dito yung tips, yung asking gifts, a photo booth, fireworks, flower girls and bearers outfit, and yung makeup ng mga siblings mo, bridesmaids, parents, and relatives. O ano, ready na ba kayo for an all-out wedding celebration? I have a full video out on how much we spent on our wedding, but what do you guys think about